Steel City. Is everybody ready to go? Let's proclaim the greatest radio show.
Welcome, fans, to another episode of The Spread. I'm your host, Jim Sella, in studio with Jay Dash and the return of JK47 from his long vacation. How was it?
Sunny.
Sounds amazing. Well, we're going to bring you another fantasy football segment. We got 126 to 150. Is that correct, Dash?
That is correct, and we ended the last segment with Reggie Bush at number 125. And here at number 126 and 127, I'm going to go back-to-back with two Indianapolis Colt tight ends. You really don't know the situation out there in Indianapolis at the position quite yet, but
I don't think anybody's ever going to know. It's really like who's got the hot hand, who has the big game. It's weird. It's just
they're
week
both
to week
going to
with
get
them.
their playing time as well. Now, if you look, Dwayne Allen, he got 29 receptions on 50 targets with 395 yards last year, but he did score 8 touchdowns, and he only played in 13 games as well. He started the season real hot, had 7 touchdowns in his first 9 games, and then he got hurt and he started missing time. He had 3 receptions over his final 4 games played. He had no more than 64 yards receiving in any game. Kobe Fleener, on the other hand, had 51 receptions last year on 92 targets, 774 yards, and 8 touchdowns. So,
man, if you could get this out of one guy for Indianapolis, he'd be top 2 tight ends in the league. Him and Gronk.
Please believe. But Kobe Fleener, I mean, you look at it, you say he had a much bigger year last year, way more targets, so we should be drafting him first. I'm not quite so sure. You look at Dwayne Allen, man, he did it big early, while Kobe Fleener, he only had 34 targets over his first 8 games. Then he had 58 over his final 8 games after Dwayne Allen was kind of injured. I think Allen is the better talent, not necessarily at receiver. Kobe Fleener may be the better receiver, but he can't block. He drops a lot of passes. I just remember last year them complaining about Kobe Fleener all the time in Indianapolis. So really, to me, Dwayne Allen is...
You sure it wasn't easy complaining about him because of his fantasy team?
No, I'm telling you, Kobe Fleener, they weren't happy with all the passes he was dropping in. Like you already know, he can't block. So
No, he can't
Dwayne
block.
Allen is the better
No.
tight end and better in the run game as well. So you're going to see him out there because of that. But they both are going to score some touchdowns for you. So I wouldn't mind having either one necessarily if you missed out on a tight end so far.
So let me ask you this. Say you miss out on the top, 8, 10 tight ends. Would you take both of them and then try to just platoon them?
I would hate to do that. It wouldn't be fun at all. I'd rather just take one and see how it turns out and try to get another tight end as well and see which one does better in the end.
Well, what about the guy you got at 128? I'm sure he really is moving up the rankings actually after yesterday's news.
Yeah, number
At least for the
128.
first 4
I actually
games.
moved him up a little bit. He's a lot lower on everybody's list still. Marcus Wheaton, wide receiver from Pittsburgh. And it's because they have Le'Veon Bell out there. They have Antonio Brown out there. And they had Martavis Bryant out there, who was, I guess, considered the number 2 receiver. But in 2 wide receiver sets, it was still going to be Marcus Wheaton. So he was going to be on the field more than Bryant in the first place.
Bryant was listed as the first backup behind Antonio Brown, and Wheaton was listed as the starter at number 2 wide receiver on the Steelers' depth chart as of last night.
Now with Bryant suspended, Marcus Wheaton just goes up Ben Roethlisberger's progression ladder 1. So there's that for you. But look, last year he was sort of a letdown. 53 receptions on 87 targets, 644 yards, and scored just 2 touchdowns. If you look, he started the year as the number 2 receiver last year, though, when Martavis Bryant, he didn't play in the, first 6 games of the season.
Right.
Marcus Wheaton had 39 targets through the first 6 games, which isn't bad. Only 47 targets over the final 10 when Bryant had 49 targets. And Marcus Wheaton last year, he showed his upside in the very first game of the season, had 97 yards, which was a season high, but then he didn't have any more than 66 yards after that. He had 38 yards or less 9 times, 3 receptions or less 7 times, and 6 times over the final 10 games of the season when Bryant was playing. Like I said, they have a bunch of talent out here, and Marcus Wheaton was a little bit lower on the ladder, still one of the starters, but with Bryant out, that should at least give him a chance to show that he deserves to be the number 2 starter full-time.
He's definitely going to be out there all the time now on the field. He
correct.
really won't. I mean, there was going to be times, I know you said he was running with the first team if there was only 2 wide receivers. I'm sure they would mix and match depending on
Well, you got to remember,
teams,
too,
coverage,
there's going to be
stuff
3
like that.
wide receivers on the field 65% of the time.
But, I mean, he'll get early through the first 4 games. He'll be out there. I mean, as long as he's breathing well, he'll be out there on the field for the offense basically every play.
Darius Hayward-Bay is another guy they were talking up a lot in.
Yeah, I think he's going to get the first shot at the number 3 spot.
It's possible.
I think Sammy Coates will get a shot. I just don't think he'll get it. He drops too much.
Number 129, Cal Rudolph, tight end from Minnesota. He only had 24 receptions, 231 yards, and 2 touchdowns last season. But he also only played in 9 games, and he had 0 targets in 2 of those games.
And our boy Teddy is a better quarterback this year.
Please believe. In 2012, you look, Cal Rudolph, that was his last full season played. 53 receptions, 93 targets, 493 yards, and 9 touchdowns. And let's not forget, Rudolph is still young. He's only 25 years old, so he's still in his prime. Like you said, Bridgewater's going to get better. They brought in Mike Wallace to open up the field a little bit. Charles Johnson should be a better receiver this season coming in.
Adrian Peterson running the ball.
Yes, so this offense should be a lot better this year. And Cal Rudolph is a good tight end in the passing game, and I see him having a decent season and somewhat of a sleeper here at this pick.
He's a good tight end in play-action passing, and with Adrian running wild this year, it'll help him a lot. He'll get open a lot more over the middle.
He was hurt last year, too, wasn't he?
Yes.
Kyle.
He missed 7 games. So, yeah, he only played half a season. If you double that, I mean, the numbers still aren't great, but I had 4 touchdowns and 48 receptions. Number 130, Vernon Davis, tight end from San Francisco.
A career bust.
Well, so far, I mean, he was good a couple years ago. Last year, he was completely terrible. 26 receptions on 50 targets, 245 yards, and 2 touchdowns in 14 games.
Beat nuts.
And look, both of his TDs came in the first game of the season. He had 4 catches for 44 yards and 2 touchdowns at Dallas in Week 1.
And then nothing the rest of the year.
Yeah, he wasn't even targeted
Kaepernick
more than
was
6
garbage
times
last
in
year
any
too,
game.
though.
Yeah, that's part of it, man. Kaepernick was terrible last season, although Vernon Davis was bad in his own right.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
no doubt about it. But you could definitely see Vernon Davis having a bounce-back season. I mean, they didn't put too many weapons out there. He could still be one of the best weapons for Kaepernick. There's Bolden, there's Torrey Smith, Jerome Simpson, Carlos Hyde's a young running back that still has to prove himself. Reggie Bush is very old now. Well, I guess I wouldn't say very old. He's 30 years old. But for the way that he plays, that's old. So, I mean, there's not a lot of weapons out here. I could see Vernon Davis having a better season. But let's not forget, he's 31 years old, too. It's not like this guy's young anymore either. So this could be a bust pick, but I'll take the chance on it if there's no tight ends left and I need one.
The one thing he's got going for him is VD is hard to get rid of.
All right, number 131, Terrence Williams, wide receiver from Dallas. He only had 37 receptions last year on 64 targets, 621 yards, but he did score 8 touchdowns.
Was he Dallas's number 2 receiver?
Yeah, he is their number 2 receiver.
If that video of Des Bryant ever comes out from Walmart, he's going to be Dallas's number 1 receiver because I hear it's bad.
I would still take Witten over him, I tell you that. Obviously, you're still going to want to take Bryant over him. Both of them were targeted 228 times combined last season. DeMarco Murray was targeted 64 times. Now, Williams, he had 6 touchdowns in his first 7 games. If you remember last year, he was scoring a lot early in the season, and he is a big play guy, but if that big play isn't there, he's not going to get you many fantasy points. He only had 2 touchdowns over his last 9 games, but he did have 2 multi-TD games. But look, 2 receptions or less 12 times, more than 4 receptions twice. He had 6 catches versus Washington and New Orleans. But yeah, he's their number 2 receiver out there. Cole Beasley's a pretty decent receiver too, running out of the slot position. They got Devin Street out there. I like Des Bryant and Jason Witten. I think Jason Witten's going to take an uptick in production this season.
I agree there.
He's old and he's not getting better by any means, but it's just the fact that with DeMarco Murray gone, they got to find other people to get the ball to, and I think Jason Witten is one of those guys. Terrence Williams is just that big play guy that's a hit-or-miss guy.
Witten's a little healthier, too, than he has been in the last couple of years.
Number 132, Bishop Sankey, running back from Tennessee.
Why was he ranked so high last year in most fantasy drafts? It was ridiculous. He was ranked like as a top 5 running back. I've never even heard of the guy. He still gets the name Cupo Sankey. Until he actually does something, he gets the worst nickname in the world.
Well, listen, out there they have David Cobb, who I already had ranked earlier. I think he has the best chance to take time away from Bishop Sankey. And I like Antonio Andrews out there, too. He could actually become the starter at some point. Like I said, I'm almost fed up with Bishop Sankey, but it looks like they're going to give him the job again, maybe. It's possible. David Cobb is definitely going to share time with him at first, if nothing else. But Sankey looks like the guy that's running with the first team. So, I mean, you got to take a chance on these running backs this late. But, yeah, there's not too much upside here. He had 569 yards last year, 2 touchdowns, 18 receptions for 133 yards with no touchdowns in the passing game. He had 14 or more carries 4 times, but he had 11 or less carries 12 times. No more than 61 yards rushing in a game. He had 2 receptions or less in 14 of his 16 games. The passing game should be a little bit better with Marcus Mariota rather than having nothing out there. Their run game should be a little better with Mariota because he can run the ball as well. And I think David Cobb and Andrews could take some serious time away from Sankey. But until they actually make that decision, you got to go with Sankey at this point. And then if it works out where he loses time, you drop him and pick something else up.
Yeah, I guess when Zach Mettenberger is your quarterback, you don't really have to respect him, and you can stack the line of scrimmage.
Believe.
So that might have worked against Kappa Sankey last year.
I'm still not high on him, though. And I'm not high
Drink some
on
caffeine, you'll be high.
I'm not high on this next guy either. Number
I never liked
133.
Pierre Garçon,
Yeah, Pierre Garçon, wide receiver from Washington.
the Frenchman.
He had 68 receptions on 105 targets and 3 touchdowns last season. In 2013, though, man, he had 113 receptions on 184 targets, 1,346 yards, and 5 touchdowns. So he had a huge year in 2013. So there's where the upside comes from and why you take a chance
Wasn't that
on him at this
RG3's
point.
rookie season, though?
Yeah. So, I mean,
when he was good.
Listen, if RG3 doesn't have a better season, I mean, these receivers aren't going to have great seasons. That's just the bottom line. But you got to expect RG3 to be better than he was last season. If he's not, I mean, there's no reason for him to be even the starting quarterback right now.
Yeah, see, I don't think he's very good.
I don't think he's great either, but the season he had last year was just terrible. I mean, you can't get any worse than that. I see him being at least a little bit better than that. And Garçon, his upside is there because he does have big production in him if he had the quarterback with him, but he's also somewhat of an inconsistent receiver as well. Last season, just one 100-yard game with 11 receptions for 138 yards and a touchdown at Philly. He had double-digit receptions twice, both within the first 3 games of the season, though. And he also had a 9-reception game versus St. Louis. But he had 3 receptions or less 8 times, 36 yards or less 9 times. And he had 3 TDs over his first 7 games, but none over the final 9 games. So he's always been an inconsistent receiver. But in 2013, he had a huge year, and his upside's there. It was with RG3. But, yeah, you're right. RG3 is probably not going to be what he was that year.
Nope, he's RG garbage.
Number 134, Darren Sproles, running back from Philadelphia.
Where's Easy at?
Yeah, he needs to be in this segment. I asked you if
Just
he
for
was going to
Darren
get in this.
Sproles.
Loves Darren Sproles.
How can you not? This guy was a beast at one time. But, I mean, you look out there now, they have DeMarco Murray, obviously, and they have Ryan Matthews out there as well. Now, Sproles should still be used in the passing game, I believe.
Well, one of those guys are going to have to play quarterback when Sam Bradford's knee crumbles, so maybe they can put Sproles in at Wildcat.
I highly doubt that.
No? All right.
But he had 40 receptions last year on 63 targets with 387 yards. He didn't score in the passing game, but he did have 6 rushing touchdowns as well. So it was a little bit of a touchdown vulture. And he did that in 15 games as well. He had a 100-yard receiving game with 7 catches for 152 yards at Indianapolis. He had 4 or more receptions 4 times. He had 11 carries in the season opener, though, and then he had no more than 7 in any game. And let's not forget, he's 32 years old, too, so he's not the same guy he used to be either.
That's an interesting number, 7 for 152 with no touchdowns.
Yeah, please believe. That's
So,
big plays without getting in the end zone, man.
Mad screen passes.
But like I said, DeMarco Murray's out there. I like Jordan Matthews at wide receiver. Nelson Aguilar looks like he's going to be a good receiver as the number 2 out there. Zach Ertz, I think, is going to be more involved this season.
Garbage.
Nick Foles is gone. Sam Bradford's in. I think that's somewhat of a downgrade.
Agreed.
So, I mean, there is upside in this offense still. I just don't think Darren Sproles is going to take up too many of the touches in this offense.
Move it along. You're beat now, Sproles.
Number 135, Nick Foles, quarterback from St. Louis.
Guy who replaced Bradford.
Yeah. Now, if you look, his
Quarterback
season last
shuffle.
year wasn't that great. Although he only played 8 games, he had 2,163 yards. So he'd have had over 4,000 in a full season, 13 touchdowns, something like 26 in a full season. But he also threw 10 picks, so his interception rate was really high. But, like I said, he only played 8 games, and in the 8th game, he only made 12 attempts as well. And if you look, he had 37 or more attempts in the first 7 games, 62 attempts at Arizona. He had 5 multi-TD games with 3 TDs versus Washington, 4 300-yard games with 411 yards at Arizona. And if you look in 2013, man, he had 2,891 yards in 13 games with 27 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. So the upside for him is here. And listen, Brian Quick looked like he was going to be a good receiver last year until he got hurt. Stedman Bailey, I think, is going to be a pretty decent receiver this year. Kenny Britt had a good year last year, although not great for fantasy. He was a pretty solid and consistent receiver for St. Louis. They still got Tavon Austin. They have a good tight end in Jared Cook. They drafted Todd Gurley, who looks like he's going to be a beast at least eventually, maybe not to begin the season. Trey Mason's still there. Benny Cunningham is good out of the backfield in the passing game. So there's a lot of weapons out there for Nick Foles. So listen, no one has this guy in the top 200, and I think he is worth a top 200 pick. And at 135, I think he's worth more than that.
Yeah, I think Foles is going to have a better year in St. Louis than he would have in Philly if he was still their starter there. I just like the Rams offense better.
Understandable. And speaking of the Rams offense, how about 136? I say Stedman Bailey, wide receiver from St. Louis. This is the first St. Louis wide receiver I have on my board. So I think he is the best option out there. Listen, he's listed as the number 3 receiver right now, but in 3 wide receiver sets, he'll be out there. He had 30 receptions on 47 targets last year, 435 yards and 1 touchdown through 14 games. And if you look, he had 5 receptions over his first 7 games, though. So he really wasn't involved early in the season. He had 25 receptions over his final 7 games. He had 32 of his 47 targets over his final 6 games. He had a 100-yard game with 5 catches for 100 yards versus Oakland. He also had 7 catches for 89 yards and a TD at San Diego. This guy's only 24 years old, too, so he still has... We remember the upside from Stedman Bailey. Tavon Austin apparently had that upside at 1.2. I don't like Tavon Austin nearly as much as I like Stedman Bailey. And I think he could be the best receiver to own in St. Louis, although I'm a little bit higher on him than some people are as well. So you might want to look. Do you like Brian Quick better? Do you like Kenny Britt better? You can make a decision. I mean, Kenny Britt was their leader last season in most categories.
He's got the big playability.
But I still think Stedman Bailey is the best receiver on this offense. Number 137, Tyler Eifert, tight end from Cincinnati. This guy had a whopping 3 catches on 3 targets for 37 yards last year. But he only played in 1 game. He got hurt. He missed most of the season, obviously.
He's moved up on a few draft boards I've seen on the 4-letter network.
Yeah, I kind of like this guy too. I mean, like I said, there's not many great tight ends, but there's a lot of guys here at the bottom you can take a chance on. So maybe if you miss out on a top tight end, you grab two of these lesser tight ends that could blow
platoon
up. Platoon them.
Oh, you love the platoon.
These guys could blow up and be top 10 tight ends by the end of the season. You never know. But in 2013, he had 39 receptions on 59 targets, 445 yards, and 2 touchdowns.
Of course, I had him that year. No touchdown, no TD, that's what his name is.
But if you look, he's 24 years old. Jermaine Gresham last season had 62 receptions on 79 targets, 460 yards, and 5 TDs for Cincinnati last season. So if Tyler Eifert takes that production, he's a better tight end than Gresham in my belief, at least in the passing game. I think he could put up better numbers than Gresham did last year, and those numbers aren't too bad outside of the yardage. I think Eifert could get more yards, though. I think he's a bigger play guy than Gresham would be.
He's certainly quicker than he is.
Please believe.
He's got the ability. Can Dalton get him the football? In the regular season, yes. In the playoffs, you're dead wrong.
Number 138.
Another fantasy sleeper.
Yeah, Philip Dorsett, wide receiver from Indianapolis. It was the first round pick of the Indianapolis Colts this year, obviously. He's from Miami, 5'10", 185 pounds. So he's not one of those big guys, but he's a guy that you can put in the slot and maybe see excellent production out of him. He looked good in training camp from everything everyone is saying. He left the last preseason game, though, with a bruised knee, but he shouldn't miss much time. He's going to be back for the beginning of the season. Here's the problem with him, though. I mean, T.Y. Hilton, Andre Johnson, they got to get their touches. Frank Gore's obviously going to get some touches. Heron is going to be somewhat involved in the run and passing game, I believe. Dwayne Allen and Coby Fleener, who we just talked about, they're going to see their share of targets. So there's a lot to go around here. Dorsett's still just a rookie, so it might take him a little time. But you're right, this is a sleeper. This guy could have a big year.
Believe it, I'm hearing he's actually impressing a lot in that he might move up and push Moncrief out of his spot.
Oh, I'm sure. Oh, yeah, there's no doubt about that, I believe. Dorsett is going to definitely overtake Moncrief, and Dorsett is going to be the third best receiver to have in this offense, I believe. Number 139, Stevie Johnson, wide receiver from San Diego.
You're a little higher on this guy than I am.
35 receptions last year on 50 targets, 435 yards and 3 touchdowns in 13 games played. So, yeah, you're right. He had a pretty bad season last year, but he has a better quarterback this year as well, obviously. Where was he? San Francisco. You got to remember, Colin Kaepernick was terrible last season. You said it yourself. Now he has Phillip Rivers, who isn't the greatest quarterback in the world, but let me tell you, he's a lot better than Colin Kaepernick in the passing game. And if you look, man, he had 3 straight 1,000-yard seasons from 2010 to 2013, and he had 100 or more targets in each of his previous 4 seasons before last year with San Francisco. He had 135 or more targets 3 times.
Phillip Rivers is probably the best QB he's ever played with. Who's he had? Ryan Fitzpatrick.
That's what I'm saying, man. So I'm not saying this guy's going to have a huge year. Listen, I have him behind Philip Dorsett, who hasn't showed anything
Yeah, I'm behind
yet.
Tyler Eifert, so you really must not think he's going to have a good year.
Well, I wouldn't go that far. Tyler Eifert has some upside, man. But Stevie Johnson, last year, he was terrible, obviously, with San Francisco. He showed not long ago, though, he can get over 1,000 yards. He did it multiple times consecutively, and he was targeted a ton for the past 4 or 5 years. I guess not last season, just 50 targets, obviously. But over 100 targets 4 straight seasons before that. They have Malcolm Floyd out there is who I consider their number 2. I think Keenan Allen's a good receiver, and he's going to have a big season. But I don't think Malcolm Floyd is better than Stevie Johnson necessarily. I think Stevie Johnson could end up having the better season than Malcolm Floyd. Malcolm Floyd, if he stays healthy, could have a good season, but he's a guy that never really has been able to stay healthy, although he did last season, and he showed a pretty good season because of it. But it's hard to trust Malcolm Floyd to stay healthy, and I think Stevie Johnson is still a better talent.
Anybody who wants to be called Stevie is no football player.
Let's not forget, too, Eddie Royal's gone, and that guy took up 91 targets last year. Number 140, Charles Sims, running back from Tampa Bay. This is a guy last year that...
You got Doug Martin higher than him?
Yeah, I do have Doug Martin, a lot higher than him, actually.
So.
I mean, he is their starting running back right now, but he was their starting running back last year, too. And Charles Sims did not start the season healthy, so he didn't play for a while. But when he came back, everybody was talking about how this guy was going to take over the starting job when he returned, and he got some playing time. He didn't run away with the starting job. I mean, Tampa Bay's offense was pretty bad last season. Jameis Winston's their quarterback now. I think they're going to be a better offense. I mean, Mike Evans is in his second year. Vincent Jackson has been a solid receiver for a long time. I like their tight end in Austin Severian Jenkins. And the only other running back they have besides Martin is Bobby Rainey. So Charles Sims, he could definitely overtake Martin in this offense still. And that's where his upside comes from. You draft him here and hope he overtakes Martin early if Martin struggles like he did last year. And really the past 2 years, I believe it was. It wasn't since 3 years ago Doug Martin was a beast in fantasy.
He doesn't want to be called the muscle hamster anymore.
No?
Nope. He says he hates it.
But if you look, Charles Sims, he had 185 yards and a touchdown. He had 19 receptions for 190 yards with no touchdowns in the passing game. But he only played 8 games. He was only a rookie. This is their 2014 third-round pick. So this is a guy they believe in. And if you look, his final game of the season, it was versus New Orleans. He had 18 carries for 69 yards and a touchdown. But he had 8 carries or less 6 times. Although he actually did have 45 or more yards receiving twice as well, just in that 8 games played. So you see the upsides there, and there's a possibility he can overtake Doug Martin in this run game. Number 141, your favorite player, Sam Bradford, quarterback from Philly.
I think his knee's going to break just from us talking about him.
It's possible. He missed all of last season, obviously, and played in just 7 games in 2013, and he is actually featured in the very first spread episode. If
Please
you guys
believe.
want to go back and look.
He was. The very first spread episode was about Sam Bradford. I forgot about that.
So there you go. But if you look at 2012 in a Rams offense that wasn't very good at the time, he had 3,702 yards passing, 21 touchdowns, and 13 interceptions. So that's not that bad of numbers, and I think I think both Foles' numbers can go up in St. Louis and Sam Bradford's can go up in Philly as well. The only thing that scares me is if Philly runs that quick offense all the time, I don't think Sam Bradford may not be able to keep up with that.
We could have 3 ACL tears ago.
Yeah, definitely. There was a lot of talk the Steelers should trade for Sam Bradford and trade Ben Roethlisberger for him. Do you remember those?
Stupidest people ever said that.
But, I mean, if you look, Jordan Matthews, Nelson Aguilar, Zach Ertz, who I think is going to have a better season. Selleck's still there, Brent Selleck. They got Riley Cooper and Miles Austin, who probably aren't going to have that great of seasons. But then you got DeMarco Murray and Ryan Matthews and Darren Sproles in the backfield, so the backfield looks good. I think they put a lot of tools around Sam Bradford to succeed. It's all up to him if he can do it.
If he can stay healthy. If not, we'll do another segment about him.
Number 142, Michael Crabtree, wide receiver from Oakland now.
He's everywhere, dude.
Last year with San Francisco, 68 receptions on 108 targets, 698 yards, and just 4 touchdowns. Again, Colin Kaepernick, he was terrible last season. I think Derek Carr had a better season than Kaepernick last year, and Derek Carr is going into his second season, so he can progress as well. Michael Crabtree might be good, he might not. There's a lot of downside here and a lot of upside. I mean, we'll have to see how Derek Carr progresses. And the one thing I do like in their offense is Latavius Murray. I think that guy is going to have a good season in their backfield. He's definitely going to beat out Trent Richardson, who's a bust.
Bum.
I mean, he hasn't been good for, 4 years now or something?
He had 1 good year.
Roy Halu I like in the passing game a little bit. But they got Amari Cooper out there, too, who I think is eventually going to become the number 1 receiver. So there's a little bit of downside for Michael Crabtree there. I think Cooper might end up seeing more targets. And really, I've never been a big Michael Crabtree fan myself. So, I mean, behind him, though, they got Andre Holmes. He led the team last year with 693 yards. So he's going to be involved still. He's the number 3 receiver out there. Behind that, though, I mean, that's all they have in the passing game, besides Michael Rivera, the tight end, who's a pretty decent tight end. But Michael Crabtree, he could have a good season. It all depends on Derek Carr.
Who's garbage?
There you have it. Number 143, here's one of my sleepers. Brandon Coleman, wide receiver from New Orleans. This guy's a rookie.
Big guy.
Yeah, 6'6", 225 pounds. He's out of Rutgers. He's 23 years old. And we were talking about New Orleans in other segments. Obviously, they have Brandon Cooks as the number 1 receiver out there. And then it's Marcus Colston as the number 2. And obviously, he's not the same type of receiver he used to be by any means. Then it's Nick Toon, Josh Morgan, Kenny Stills they lost, Jimmy Graham they lost. Their tight ends are Ben Watson and Josh Hill. They did bring in C.J. Spiller. He should be used in the passing game a little bit. They have Kerry Robinson and Mark Ingram as other running backs. Ingram, obviously, the starter. But Brandon Coleman, he's going to be the number 3 receiver. He's definitely the number 3 receiver out there. And Cooks, Colston, Coleman, the 3 C's. I think Coleman could actually step up and turn into the number 2 if Colston shows any more decline this season. And I'm really looking at drafting Brandon Coleman late if anybody a lot of people probably don't even know this guy, first of all. So there's half the people not even going to pick him. And then a lot of other people are going to wait till the end. I wouldn't mind drafting him here at around 143, 144.
You know Breeze is going to be hucking and chucking, so might as well take a New Orleans receiver.
Here's another sleeper in an offense you like, Jim. Number 144, Brian Quick, wide receiver from St. Louis. Last year, in 7 games, 25 receptions on 39 targets, 375 yards, and 3 touchdowns. If you look, in the opening game of the season, 7 catches, 99 yards versus Philly. And he followed that up with 7 catches for 74 yards at Tampa Bay. He had a multi-TD game with 6 catches for 87 yards and 2 touchdowns at Philly. He's still just 26 years old. He's a good size at 6'3". Like I said, he was out most of last season with a shoulder injury. They got Stedman Bailey, who I like. They got Kenny Britt, who was their most consistent receiver last season. But Brian Quick looked like he was going to have the biggest year early on until he got hurt. And there's a chance he comes back and turns into that number 1 receiver again. Who knows? I mean, it's listed as Brian Quick and Kenny Britt as the starting 2 receivers right now. So it's possible Quick is a very nice sleeper to grab here this late.
Yeah, I think Austin's a bust. He's pretty much proved it. So it's going to be Quick, Bailey, and Britt as the wide receivers, 1, 2, and 3, regardless. He's getting playing time.
Yeah, and Quick's more of a guy you want on the outside. He's 6'3". He's not someone you want to put in a slot. Stedman Bailey is perfect for the slot. So sort of like the Steelers situation where Marcus Wheaton is going to play on the outside and 2 receivers and whatnot. You know what I mean? Stedman Bailey may be a better receiver than Brian Quick, but Brian Quick's going to be on the field more often. Number 145, Kenny Stills, wide receiver from Miami. I had to move him.
It said MIA. I thought he was missing. That means Miami. I got it.
But listen, I had to move this guy up the list too. I know, I mean, I don't expect him to have a huge year or anything, but if you look, he had 85 targets last season. He had 63 receptions, 931 yards, although he only scored 3 times in 15 games. Obviously, Drew Brees was his quarterback then, and he got a downgrade at that position this season with Tannehill. But Tannehill wasn't a bad quarterback last season either.
Actually, he continues to be getting better.
Yeah, please believe. Tannehill looked real good last season, and that actually makes him one of the top 12 quarterbacks to have in fantasy this year, actually. But if you look, Stills had 2 100-yard games last year. He had 5 catches for 162 yards and a TD at Pittsburgh. He had 5 catches for 103 yards and a TD at Detroit. He had 8 catches for 98 yards versus Baltimore. He had 5 or more receptions 7 times. And this guy's still very young, 23 years old. So I think a lot of people are sleeping on Kenny Stills for some reason. Now, we said it before, Jim. Jarvis Landry's their best receiver out there. Greg Jennings is listed as their number 2. Well, Kenny Stills is listed as their number 1 receiver right now. So why people are sleeping on Kenny Stills just because he doesn't have Drew Brees anymore, I'm not quite sure. I think he's still better than Greg Jennings, wouldn't you say?
Definitely. Greg Jennings in his heyday maybe be able to beat out Stills, but not now. He's old as balls.
Please believe. I mean, they did bring in Jordan Cameron and they drafted Devontae Parker, but I see Devontae Parker taking over Greg Jennings' spot before he takes over Kenny Stills. So if that does happen, let's say Devontae Parker becomes the number 2 receiver. You got Kenny Stills on the other side, Landry in the slot. You got Jordan Cameron at tight end. So you have a lot of options. Maybe he does turn into the 4th option on the offense at some point. But I still see good upside here with a good quarterback and listed next to Greg Jennings right now.
Not the best run game in Miami either, so they're going to be chucking it.
Number 146, Phillip Rivers, quarterback from San Diego.
I thought this was somebody new. You got him listed at running back here on my sheet.
Yeah, who knows what I'm doing.
Typo.
But listen, 4,286 yards last season, not too bad. 31 TDs isn't too bad either. I told you when I listed Matt Ryan high, you said higher than you like, that there aren't many 30 touchdown quarterbacks behind him. Phillip Rivers is one of them, but he's also very inconsistent. He throws a lot of picks, 18 picks last season. But, I mean, he's still a good quarterback, not necessarily someone you can trust in fantasy, at least over the past couple years. There was one time Phillip Rivers was the guy to have in fantasy, and that's where his upside comes from. Maybe he can get back to those huge numbers he put up in that one season.
Only guy with a forehead to rival Peyton Manning.
But look, he had a pretty decent season last year, although inconsistent, like I said. 33 or more attempts 12 times, 4 300-yard games with 383 at Baltimore. He had 4 games with 205 yards or less, though. 9 multi-TD games, 7 in the first 8 games of the season. So he started out better than he ended the season. But look, he had a season high of 4 TDs at San Francisco as well. They have Keenan Allen out there. They brought in Stevie Johnson, lost Eddie Royal. They still have Malcolm Floyd out there. Jacoby Jones they brought in. Antonio Gates is suspended, but he'll be back eventually. I like Ladarius Green at tight end until that happens anyways. They drafted a good running back in Melvin Gordon. Danny Woodhead is coming back healthy this season, and I like him in fantasy this year. And Brandon Oliver showed his spurts last season as well. I like the weapons they have in San Diego. It all depends if Phillip Rivers can get back to where he was at one time. Number 147. DeAngelo Williams, running back from Pittsburgh.
Who could put up big production in the first 2 games.
Yeah, I mean, that's really why I have him listed here. I mean, if you missed out on some of those other running backs, grab DeAngelo Williams. You'll get 2 solid games out of him probably, if not big games. Who knows? And while you're playing him, you can find a running back in free agency that comes out of nowhere. It happens every year. You just got to stay vigilant and keep checking the spread, I guess you want to say, because you don't want to check ESPN.
ESPN doesn't know squat.
But I think, yeah, that's why I have him here, just for the first 2 games, because we seen it last year. When Bell's playing, LeGarrette Blount didn't get much playing time at all, and I don't expect DeAngelo Williams to get that playing time either. But listen, if you draft DeAngelo Williams and you find a guy after week 1 you think's going to be a good running back moving forward,
scoop him up.
Yeah, just scoop him up for DeAngelo Williams. Don't say, oh, DeAngelo got a game left, so keep him and play him again. No, don't do that. But they also have Dre Archer out there who is going to take a little bit of this playing time, at least early in the season. I wouldn't say split time with DeAngelo. He'll be the feature back, but Archer's going to get a few carries at least in the first couple games while Bell's out.
Eddie B doesn't like that at all. He hates Archer.
Yeah, so do you.
Me too.
Yeah, you guys
Garbage.
Don't like Archer. I can't believe you'd say that, man, after a rookie season where he got hurt in the first game. But the Steelers have New England in game 1. They were 9th first to run in 2014. And then in the second game, they have San Francisco, who was 7th first to run. So it's going to be a tough test for them.
10 starters from last year's team.
I understand. I mean, San Francisco's not going to be the worst run defense because of it, though. I mean, they're still going to be...
You lose Justin Smith, Alden Smith, Chris Borland, and Patrick Willis all off your starting defense.
I'm still not sleeping on San Francisco's D's not going to be good by any means.
And Ray McDonald,
I just don't think they're going to be completely terrible and teams are just going to run all over them. I mean, San Francisco always puts out a decent defense out there in some way or another.
We'll see.
I mean, it's just like New England almost, man. You could go around and say there's so many names out there that aren't that great, but then by the end of the season, New England's defense is pretty good. You know what I mean? Number 148, Matt Jones, running back from Washington. He was the 3rd-round pick this season. He's 6'2", 231 pounds. His upside comes from, just Alfred Morris. If anything happens to him, and someone got to split time with Alfred Morris. He's not going to get every single play. And Matt Jones is most likely the guy to take the backup role of Alfred Morris. That Roy Halu's gone. He was very good in the passing game, and maybe Matt Jones turns into the guy that's good in the passing game. I mean, you look last year, Halu had 42 receptions, 477 yards, and 2 TDs in the passing game. So maybe Matt Jones takes over that role, and maybe he shows a little bit more upside and takes a little bit more time away from Alfred Morris as well.
He's a big back,
Yeah. I mean, they wouldn't have drafted him in the 3rd round if they didn't plan on using him in some way or another.
They're not going to be able to throw, so they're going to have to run.
Well, actually, man, if RG3 has any better of a season, it should help Alfred Morris and Matt Jones because, right now people could probably put 10 in the box and
put 12 in the box.
That believe RG3 couldn't beat him. So he got to go out there and beat him so he can open it up a little bit for those running backs.
Can the next guy beat anybody over the top?
Carson Palmer, number 149, Arizona. He showed it last season. He did have a good 5-game stretch or something, 6-game stretch.
Yeah, he was on fire whenever the season started.
Yep.
Yeah.
Julian Edelman has as many touchdown passes in the playoffs as Carson Palmer.
I'm not saying anything about Carson Palmer in the playoffs. Your fantasy season's over with by the time that rolls around.
Believe it.
But look, last year, 1,626 yards in 6 games, had 11 touchdowns compared to 3 picks in that span, and Arizona was 6-0 in that span too, which is ridiculous. He had 2 300-yard games with 329 versus Philly. He had multiple TDs in his first 5 games with 0 touchdowns in his final game. He had at least 31 pass attempts in all 6 games with 42 or more pass attempts twice. But he's also 35 years old. He doesn't stay healthy very much. The upside is there, but there's also a lot of downside in grabbing him. But if you're going to carry 2 quarterbacks, he's not the worst second quarterback to carry. Look, he had no more than 26 touchdowns in any season since 2006. He had 24 touchdowns and 22 picks with Arizona in 2013. So that 6-game sample, it might be
a fluke.
Yeah, somewhat of a fluke, I guess you would say. I don't see him being that good, but I think Arizona can be good in the long run, and they're going to have a good season. They're going to challenge, maybe not Seattle for the division, but I think they have a very good chance of making the playoffs this year.
Yeah, I'll agree with that, but Palmer, when Van Olhoffen took out his knee, he took out his whole career. Block you, Palmer.
Well, listen, he has Michael Floyd, who has a couple dislocated fingers. From everything I'm hearing, though, they're hopeful he's going to be ready for the beginning of the season. I haven't dropped him on my fantasy list as of yet. It looks like he should be healthy. We'll have to see. Larry Fitzgerald, your boy, they still have him out there. And John Brown is a guy I think is going to have a good season as well, and even in fantasy possibly. So he has 3 good receivers out there. He has a good running back that works well in the passing game in Ellington. And then they drafted that guy, David Johnson, who is also supposed to be very good in the passing game. And they brought in Chris Johnson as well. So the weapons are out there for him. He just got to stay healthy and get it done. Showed what he did last season. And number 150, another one of my sleepers, Eric Ebron, tight end from Detroit.
He's expected to have a big second year.
Yeah, I mean, if you look, man, this was their first round pick in 2014. People seem to forget that. I mean, you have one bad season and everybody seems to forget that a lot of people were really high on this guy at one point. Now, last season, it was a down year for a rookie, I guess. 25 receptions on 49 targets, 248 yards, and a touchdown through 13 games. He had 4 receptions or less and 38 yards or less in all 13 games. Brandon Pettigrew was playing most of the snaps out there. Kelvin Johnson coming back healthy. Golden Tate had a big season last year. They got Lance Moore now. Joik Bell at running back still. We'll have to see if he's healthy for the beginning of the season. But Amir Abdullah, they're saying, is going to have a big year in Detroit, and I'm starting to believe it. And really, I think the weapons are out there to open things up for Ebron, who should be the number 1 tight end out there this season, no doubt.
I agree about Abdullah, too. He's going to be a good back, especially in PPR leagues.
But that's it. That wraps up our first 150.
That's all we got, and there ain't no mo. Actually, there is more, so keep tuning into the spread. You can follow us on Twitter at bet_the_spread. You can follow me on Twitter at betjimthewin. Check out the Facebook page at facebook.com/betthespread. Keep coming back to YouTube and keep clicking subscribe.